and welcome to Technocracy News and Trends. Patrick Wood here, Editor-in-Chief, and as I mentioned before, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. This is almost a one-man operation, although I have several people that feed me information from around the world. I appreciate every article that gets linked, that gets sent in. Many of them end up appearing on Technocracy News and Trends. Volumes of traffic continue to come from all around the world. It's quite amazing. I'm still amazed. Some days there's as much as 60% of the traffic to our website is from overseas. It should be the other way around, I think, because this site was originally created for Americans. But apparently people outside of America understand technocracy better than America does. This is going to change. We're going to stay at it until everybody understands it and gets a good bird's eye view of what it is. Well, we got some good stories this week. And I'll tell you, it's hard to pick one just when you think you've seen it all, just when you think that's the time to take a rest, just when you think things are calming down, bam, up pops 6, 10, 20 stories, whatever, that just make you absolutely shake your head. I'm sure you're in the same situation. The only way really to take a break is just to turn everything off, go outside, take a walk, whatever, get away from all the electronic stuff, and that way you won't see these stories. But you still have to come back to them anyway, don't you? The first story I want to share with you today is a good news story. And heaven knows we need a good news story once in a while. And I've got one for you. I wrote this earlier this week on May 19th. And I want you to see this story. Long live the resistance. Vive la resistance. Tyrants get busted by courts, law enforcement, and even city councils. You're not going to see this story in the mainline press, are you? They won't tell you about this kind of stuff that's going on. But all around the country, finally, a legal challenge is mounting. And law enforcement officials, judges, and other city officials and so on are rising up against the governors mostly, telling them that their orders for shutdown and all the other stuff for churches and stores and retail is unconstitutional, and they can't do that. This needs to be done in every state. Fortunately, right now, only about 30 states are involved, but it's still a very good news story. Let's take a look at it. Constitutional sheriffs, judges, and state legislators are rising up against tyrannical orders issued by state and local leaders, and they deserve our support and encouragement. Here are a few examples of courageous actions in the heat of battle to break the bands of tyranny. In Oregon, a judge just declared Governor Kate Brown's emergency orders and lockdown to be null and void. A local story up there reported this. Baker County Circuit Judge Matthew Shirtcliffe made the ruling Monday in a lawsuit brought by churches who had sued, saying the social distancing directives were unconstitutional. And indeed they are. The First Amendment provides for the free expression of religion, and that doesn't mean that the state can come in and tell you, well, you can worship, but you can't be worshiping unless you're social distance and 6 feet apart, etc. That's absolutely unconstitutional. It goes on, the suit also argued that emergency powers only last for a month, and after that, Brown would have needed legislative approval. That also is true, and the judge agreed. Well, I tell you, in a cold sweat, Governor Brown up there convinced the Oregon Supreme Court to issue a stay on the lower court while it considers the claims. If they have a brain in their head, and I don't know that they do, they may not, but if they have at least one constitutional molecule in their head, they will come to the same conclusion as the lower court. And the governor in Oregon will be chopped off, if you will, at the knees, because there's nothing you can do at that point. If the judge says, the Supreme Court says, nope, can't do that, that will be the end of it, and that will be the end of the lockdown in Oregon. In Hood River, Washington, this is an odd county, Klickitat County Sheriff Bob Songer is refusing to enforce some aspects of Governor Jay Inslee's social distancing order because they are unconstitutional. Then, the City Council of Kelso, Washington, is considering a proclamation to defy Inslee's continued shutdown order. And listen to this proclamation. This is pretty good. Governor Inslee's recent proclamation, number 20-05, known as Stay Home, Stay Healthy, and other follow-up proclamations, have caused confusion for business owners in Kelso and have failed to clearly identify which businesses are and aren't allowed to operate and who is or isn't allowed to reopen. Whereas Washington County citizens, residents of Kelso, and state lawmakers have challenged the constitutionality of the governor's proclamations related to the essential and non-essential business, and a lawsuit has been filed in federal court. Whereas business owners have become increasingly concerned over the duration of proclamations with no clear and concise end to the orders and the failure of the orders to address the inherent differences between communities that differ in population density while inflicting major economic losses daily. And this goes on. And they resolve at the end that as the City Council of the City of Kelso, we hereby issue our own proclamation to alleviate liability concerns to our city by instructing law enforcement and city officials to not enforce Governor Inslee's proclamations against businesses operating in any capacity. The governor does not have the legal authority to force city employees, including law enforcement officers, to take action against businesses or citizens. Kelso City employees are not employed by the governor of the state, thus making the decision to enforce Governor Inslee's orders a decision of the City Council regardless of the outcome of the lawsuits determining constitutionality. Hats off to Kelso. This is great. Any city council, by the way, in the good old US of A, can issue such a proclamation if they so desire to do so. There's nothing holding them back, except that maybe they need a few citizens behind them to give them a little prodding to do so, because most all of these shutdown orders have in fact been patently unconstitutional. The government has no right to tell businesses which ones can survive and which ones cannot survive. This has never been the purview of government, and it still isn't today. In Illinois, Governor Pritzker ran afoul of constitutional sheriff James Mendrick in DuPage County, who stated, listen to this, as sheriff, I feel that my own First Amendment constitutional rights to free speech have been completely trampled on by a governor who has threatened my office's reimbursement and grant funds as a tool to force me not to speak. I just can't do this anymore. I stand with our citizens and businesses of DuPage County who have offered no trouble or no resistance to any rule we put on them, no matter how strange. And then he correctly concluded, catch this, we are not stormtroopers, we are peacekeepers. Hats off to the sheriff in DuPage County. This is fantastic. Police in New Jersey refused orders to shut down a gym that was practicing civil disobedience by opening its doors in defiance of the governor's orders. The police did, in fact, show up, but this is what they said. Listen to this. You're all in violation of the executive order, but on that note, have a good day. Everybody be safe. And they walked away. And even as they walked away, they were fist bumping with the people who were there to protest. It was absolutely fantastic. In Pennsylvania, constitutional sheriffs in 2 counties are refusing to cite businesses that are defying Governor Tom Wolf's shutdown order. The Penn Live Patriot News reported, our office will not be enforcing any order that violates our constitutional rights, said the Post on Cumberland County Sheriff's Department Facebook page. Sheriff Anderson has stated, quote, I have no intentions in turning local business owners into criminals. Well, amen to that. Hats off to that guy. In Wisconsin, 5 different sheriffs from different counties are battling Governor Tony Evans over his shutdown orders. Polk County Sheriff Brent Walk said, as your sheriff, I have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Wisconsin. I have always respected the civil liberties of the citizens in Polk County. Way to go, Sheriff. In California, Humboldt County Sheriff William Hansel is defying Governor Gavin Newsom's unconstitutional orders, and he says, quote, "As sheriff, I am the protector of constitutional rights in Humboldt County, and if an order is issued that I believe violates our constitutional rights, I will not enforce it." Way to go, Sheriff. There are many other examples of the same type of resistance against tyrannical and unconstitutional orders by governors, mayors, and other county officials. It's reported that at least 60 sheriffs in more than 12 states are publicly opposing unconstitutional orders issued by governors. Have you heard this anywhere in the news? No, you won't, because they're not going to tell you. They don't want this to become a trend. But guess what? It's becoming a trend anyway. And you need to go and encourage your local county sheriff and your local city council and other officials that you can get their ear to talk to, and encourage them to do this, folks. This is absolutely, patently unconstitutional, and we need to put a stop to it. Of course, you will not see any of these feature stories about the resistance in America. To the contrary, media is lambasting all such actions as ludicrous, short-sighted, selfish, and harmful. Shame on those constitutional sheriffs, they say. Why, they're selfish. They're only thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about the greater good. America, it's way past time for you to rise up and follow the lead of courageous and constitutional judges, sheriffs, local and state legislators. They're out there just waiting for you to show up. They're out on a limb for you, and they need your help and support. And I hope wherever you live and wherever you're listening to this in America, that you will take this as a challenge to go find them out and then support them and say, way to go, Sheriff. We love you for what you're doing. We'll vote for you again. You're doing what you need to be doing to protect us from these tyrants. Well, this is a good news story, as I said. Not every story in the news today is a good news story, but this one is a keeper, for sure. I wrote another little story today called Contact Tracing, when game night turned into a nightmare. And I'm going to talk a lot more about contact tracing as we go forward with Technocracy News and Trends, because there's so much here. It's just huge. And this is a story that's not going to go away, because the contact tracing movement is well underway across America. And you're going to see more and more about it in the news. Whenever you see that term, your little antennas ought to go boink right now and start paying attention to what they're saying, because this could wreck your life, literally. If they get a hold of you and get their hooks in you, it could have grave effects on you. So let me read a little story to you. When an unskilled $17 an hour contact tracer shows up at your doorstep, how will you respond? Will he or she be able to wreck your life in a few short minutes? Follow the saga of Henry Kron and his family, and be sure to see all the headlines and video at the end of this story. There's more, much more. That's why it's to be continued. That's what I put at the bottom of this, because I think there's going to be another installment or two before we're done. I normally don't write in this style, by the way, but I wanted to kind of hook people in that maybe couldn't get it just by regular declarative type writing and research. Okay, we'll put it in more personal form, put it in the form of a story, and it makes sense. Everything in my story, by the way, is backed up by the articles that appear at the end. But here it goes. Henry Kron and his wife Helen had just enjoyed a family dinner time with their two preteen daughters, Leanne and Elise. They were beautiful girls, by the way. Henry headed to the coat closet to get the girls' favorite board game off the top shelf. He had promised that this would be game night, and they were all looking forward to it. Actually, life was just starting to look good again after the extended lockdown during the global pandemic. That one had cost Henry his last job, and finding a new job was next to impossible, with 40 million other Americans out of work at the same time. In fact, The lack of income for several months left them unable to make their house payment for 2 months in a row. They came within an inch of being foreclosed. Their retirement fund wasn't large, but it took the whole thing just to get caught up. With a lot of hard work and a bit of luck, Henry had finally landed a good job. Even though he would be on probation for the first 90 days, he was determined to do whatever it would take to keep the job. Just as they decided who would get to roll the dice to start the game, the doorbell rang. Henry went to the door thinking, who would call on us at this time of the evening? He certainly was not expecting anyone. As he opened the door, there stood a soldier in a crisp, clean, fatigue uniform. "Mr. Kron?" he asked. "Yes," replied Henry. "Is there something going on in our neighborhood?" "Well, no, sir," he replied. "I'm here to give you and your family a coronavirus test because we received a report that you have unknowingly been exposed to someone who actually had the virus." "What? Who was that?" Henry asked. "I'm not at liberty to say, sir," he replied. "All of that kind of information is private and confidential." Henry immediately thought back to the restaurant he and his wife visited for dinner 2 days ago. They were asking each guest to fill out a form with their name and address information, and they did. The waitress said it had something to do with contact tracing rules that had just been implemented in their state. The soldier explained that testing was mandatory, but there'd be no cost to him. It would only take a couple of minutes to take samples from everyone in the household. Reluctantly, Henry consented. What else could he do? After signing the HIPAA agreement and liability waiver, the soldier took a quick cheek swab of all 4 of them. I'll take these kits to the lab for processing tonight," he said, "and I will personally get back to you in the morning with the results. Oh, Mr. Kron, until you hear from me, please remain at home, just in case." Well, after this intrusion, game night was overshadowed by the fear of what if. Nobody really felt like laughing. Henry and Helen had a restless night after the girls went to bed. Just after breakfast the next morning, the phone rang. "This is Henry Kron speaking," he answered as he picked up the phone with a twinge of dread in his stomach. "Oh, Mr. Kron, I'm sorry to report that your wife Helen tested positive for COVID-19, even though she has no symptoms yet," the caller said, "so your family will have to make some adjustments over the next 2 weeks. "Well, what kind of adjustments?" Henry asked. "Well, you'll all have to self-quarantine at home and avoid contact with anyone else," the caller explained. "But we can help you with any needs you might have, like groceries or pharmaceuticals." You mean my daughters can't go to school?" "That's correct, sir. They will have to stay home for the duration." "Do you mean I can't go to work?" "That's also correct, sir, but only for 2 weeks. We will test all of you again at the end just to confirm that you're all in the clear." Henry was starting to feel a sense of panic. Could they really do this to him? "Wait," Henry exclaimed. "If I don't go to work tomorrow, I'll be fired from my new job, and if I get fired again, I'll lose my house. In any case, I just read that your COVID-19 tests are returning a high rate of false positives. You can't do this to me." "I understand how you feel, sir, but our contact tracing guidelines are very clear, and your cooperation is essential to help you and everyone else be safe and well." "Well, you can stick that in your ear, soldier boy," Henry exclaimed with rising temper. "I am going to work, and that's the end of the matter." "Sir, it's not that easy. We require daily contact with you until the 2-week period is completed, and if you violate the order, you could receive a citation that will cost you $500 a day. Furthermore," he explained, "if you were to test positive before the end of the self-quarantine, you could be criminally charged for intentionally spreading the coronavirus, and that could mean 1 year in jail. Oh, and Mr. Kron, We'll also need to know everyone you and your family have been in contact with during the last 7 days. Henry's heart sank. He knew this was the end of the line for him and his family. He was trapped. He'd worked so hard for so many years to get where he was, but this would be the final blow that killed it all. He could seek low-income housing, perhaps, but the application line was a mile long because unemployment was so high. Maybe they would just sell everything and start over somewhere else. More sleepless nights ahead, he told Helen. Their daughters didn't fully understand, but they knew their parents were very upset. They all hugged, temporarily oblivious to COVID-19. At least they still had each other, for now. To be continued. Not next week, maybe the week after that. Now, I'll point out that there's a number of stories here below. Stories you have to read to believe. You can do your own little self-discovery here to figure out more about contact tracing. It's about various states, some national stories. There's a great little clip here from Broward County, an official there, talking about removing people from their homes. The course will train an army of contact tracers. That is one prominent university in America. Tens of thousands of Americans apply for contact tracing jobs, and it is no wonder, by the way, with unemployment being what it is today, any job's better than no job. So people are signing up. Tracking the virus may require 300,000 workers, and we're nowhere close, the headline says. That's an estimate, by the way, of how many contact tracers it's going to take across America to make sure everybody gets traced and clamped down when necessary, without respect to who they are, or what they're doing, or their life situation. Virtually none of these people have any medical training whatsoever. They're just following the rules. They're given orders. By golly, they will carry out the orders, and if you don't obey the orders, you almost can expect a policeman's going to show up with a gun at his side with that ever visible threat of force and say, you will stay home, you will not violate this order, and if we catch you out somewhere else, you will be fined. You might even spend time in jail. And we don't care who you are, but you're not above the law, they say. Except that we learned in our first story that all this nonsense coming from governors like Jay Inslee and others is patently unconstitutional. It all truly is null and void if it could only get before legitimate courts who have their constitutional heads screwed on correctly. Well, I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. That's an earful for today. Please share this video if you will. It needs to be heard by people around the world. And if you will be so kind to also like this video if you're on social media. Like it, certainly, if you're on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends by email or other social media. And get the word out. One last word about technocracy. This is the clear and present danger to society. There's so much more to say to this. There's only so much time that I can put into a video like this. But you need to study technocracy and understand what it is, because it's not those other things. It's not just fascism. It's not just socialism. It's not just communism. It's a different animal with different actors behind it. We need to discover what this is and put the kibosh on all of these unconstitutional things that are happening in our country. The technocrats think that they have scored a coup de grace on the entire planet. We need to show them they're wrong. See you next time.